floor space is essentially the parking space for one who uses a wheelchair, and that clear floor space must be positioned at operable parts and at other features that are required to be accessible. And the clear floor space must be unobstructed for the most part. Next slide. When the clear floor space is confined on three sides, it has to get bigger. Next slide. Next slide. Sometimes clear floor space can include knee and toe space beneath an element, such as at a drinking fountain or other element that needs to be accessible. Next. And as you see here, we try to describe that profile of the knee and toe in a wheelchair so that we can tell you how much of that clear floor space can go beneath an element. This becomes very much more difficult when we start talking about other types of mobility devices, such as scooters that people are now using in the United States. When the accessibility standards were first developed, people were not using these kinds of mobility devices. Next slide. So from your clear floor space, you need to be able to reach the operable parts that are on accessible features, such as the controls for the lavatory or the elevator buttons. And so when your forward reach is obstructed, we know already that you cannot reach very much further than your toes. Also, we have requirements for side reach. So the architect has to know, am I positioning this clear floor space for a side reach or a forward reach? Next. Keep going. There we go. Okay, so operable parts. Now this is as close as we come to a performance standard. We say no tight grasping, twisting, turning of the wrist. Actually, this requirement is in crying out for a further clarification. It is not clear to architects and lawyers what no tight grasping, twisting, turning of the wrist means. And so we are looking to develop an even more prescriptive standard for this. Again, bear in mind that people can be sued for non-compliance. People can lose a great deal of financial resources if they do things wrong under the ADA. And so we owe it to the covered entities to make sure that they know when they have succeeded and when they have failed. There is no room for failure in the ADA. Next slide. Very quickly, turning space. Turning space has got to be accessible. Keep going. We show T-turns. Next. T-turns, yes. And so this is one configuration of turning space. Next slide. Or you may, in fact, have a turning circle. And I'm going to go over to the next several slides and go more quickly to keep going, keep going. There we go. So when we have to turn around an obstruction, you notice that we have the hairpin turn on the left side of the screen. The hairpin turn requires more space at the top of the U, and the turn that has a more generous width, we prescribe to be less space at the top of the U, more space on the legs. Next. We have not forgotten people with vision impairments and other disabilities. We regulate protruding objects along all circulation paths, not just in the accessible route used by wheelchair users, but on all circulation paths. And we make sure that the protruding object is detectable by someone using a white cane. Next slide. There are a number of examples of protruding objects you find in the environment all the time, including, I can see it. Thank you. I get the 5-minute notice, and it's universally designed for my low vision. It's very large. Thank you. So we have examples of protruding objects. Next slide. In the environment, things that people often don't think of, such as a wall sconce or some other object that is mounted on a wall, and a blind person may not detect it. Next slide. Okay, so here are some other examples. If a drinking fountain is not recessed in an alcove, for example, it will protrude into the circulation path and could also present a barrier for someone who is blind. We do not use tactile warning surfaces to warn of protruding objects. I know some countries do, but in the US, again, we reserve the detectable warnings or the tactile warning surfaces for a notice to the blind person that they are about to conflict with motor vehicles. Next slide. This slide always makes me cringe. It always makes me feel uncomfortable. We have allowed a 12-inch projection on either side of a post-mounted object. And even even though someone detects the post, they may in fact be hit in the head with signs. And we find this occurring quite often in our environment, particularly in the public right-of-way, in streets and sidewalks where there are signs and there are conflicts with blind people. And I don't think that we have been very successful yet in addressing this concern. Next slide. And next. We address communication barriers. We require visible flashing alarms, both audible and visible, so that people who are deaf are notified if there is a fire in the building or other emergency. Next slide. We require signs identifying permanent spaces to have both Braille and raised letters, because in the United States, very few blind people actually read Braille. Those who do read Braille like the grade 2 Braille, which is the more sophisticated style of Braille, but many blind people are not educated to read Braille. So we require raised letters that someone could trace with the finger as well. Next slide. This slide shows a list of the projects that our agency is currently working on, and there are quite a few here. We are going to publish very soon some guidelines for outdoor areas. This is mostly picnicking and trails and hiking and camping. Because of the costs associated with this rule and the difficulty in estimating the cost, which is a requirement of federal rulemaking, we are going to apply these requirements only to the federal government at first, and then we will apply them to the private sector later, after we have a better idea of the overall costs. We're also regulating, in the process of regulating, passenger vessels. And we have proposed our draft of our proposed rules on our website. You can look at it now. This is to enable people with disabilities to take a cruise, or ride on a ferry, or ride on other types of boats. We have brand new guidelines for public rights-of-way, which will be finalized very soon. And these require accessibility in sidewalks and street crossings. We also have a new rule that is going to appear very shortly for transportation vehicles. I think many of you are aware of our ICT, Information and Communications Technology rulemaking, which is about to occur. And I was very excited to see that there are some presentations here in this session on self-service transaction machines, because we are going to begin to do regulations in the area of all of these machines that are proliferating all over the environment and are not accessible to people who are blind. Also, the U.S. Department of Transportation has recently published a notice saying that they will require access to machines used in airports for ticketing. And we are, because of our events related to Katrina and Rita, we are going to do some further regulation in the area of emergency housing, such as trailers that are taken from place to place. Last slide. Medical diagnostic equipment is a very new responsibility for us, and this is for accessibility onto examination tables, examination chairs, so that it's not enough that you can just get into the doctor's office. Now you will be able to get onto the examination table, into the examination chair, and our draft standards are out and available for viewing right now. And the last two shared use paths will become part of our public rights-of-way rulemaking. And classroom acoustics, extremely important for children who are hard of hearing. Yes, there are numbers of assistive devices that are used, but they do not enable children to socially interact with one another. And so it is extremely important to begin to look at the acoustical environment of classrooms. And my last slide is just a slide showing several of our technical assistance materials that are available. You can download them from our website, or you can write to us and get print copies of these documents as well. We do try to develop a lot of interesting technical assistance. We are doing some new materials that will be available in 6 months or so, which will be far more exciting because they will have modeling and they will have videos and images on them. So I hope that you will all visit the Access Board's website. 2 slides. Next one. Which is listed on my closing page. Thank you all very much for your attention, and I hope to talk with each of you during this session.